everybody. Welcome to a bonus episode of The Rope of Hope. Tonight, I have Ted Smith back with me again. He's back for a second time, and we are going to be discussing narcissistic relationships, how to see them, how to cope with them, all that. Before we jump in, if you guys want to support this broadcast, if you want to be part of what I'm doing, then please consider keeping me caffeinated. Go to buymeacoffee.com/this fat girl life. By being a financial supporter, partner with me, you not only are helping to spread this message of hope, to help others know that they're not alone in what they're dealing with, but by following me there, that's where you get the tea. You are going to find out everything before anybody else does. And there's some big stuff coming up. So you definitely want to go there. Even if you don't financially support me, follow me. But if you do want to be a partner, $5 buys you a cup of coffee. That's all it takes. So let's go ahead and jump on into this. Ted, for anybody who has not met you before on here, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ted. I'm based in St. Louis, and I'm a published author. I wrote a book called Healthy Me, Happy We, Transforming Relationships with Yourself and Others, that recaps my story, my experience, having lived through a 15-year abusive relationship with an alcoholic narcissist, and the healing journey that I've experienced in the last 2 years.
Perfect. Well, we are going to go ahead and jump right on in. I'm going to let you kind of take the reins and share your story.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I met my ex-husband when I was 17. He was 22, and I had just recently kind of come to grips with my sexuality. So it was my first gay relationship. And, I found in the first 5 years or so of that relationship that, since it was my first experience with a man, I kind of trusted him. And since he was older and had other experiences, I trusted him to show me the ropes of what a relationship was and how we should interact, and just learning how to be in a grown-up relationship. And so I really didn't know any better in terms of realizing, there were the red flags that existed early on that I can see now looking back on it, in terms of how quickly the abuse, began, which was really just even months into the relationship. I was unhappy for a long time, but we had good times. And that was really what confused me the most and what prevented me from realizing that what was happening was abuse. Because when I would hear the term emotional abuse, I thought that meant just constant ridicule, constant fighting, and just, constant derision. But that's really not the case in an abusive relationship. There's a cycle to it, where there obviously is that buildup of tension, and then there's the explosion, and then there's a reconciliation. But what I didn't realize is there's also a period of love bombing, of calm, of good, of happy. And that is intentional on the abuser's part to keep the target in the relationship longer. And because of that cycle, and because there were good times, I believed that if I loved him hard enough and did what he wanted and made the changes that he demanded that I make, that things would get better. I found that I realized, at the end, that I was never actually in love with him. I was in love with his potential. I was in love with this version of him that I thought he could be, that I believed he could be, and that I still believe he could be, possibly. But I was never in love with the man that he was in the present. I was never actually happy with what was going on.
So I remember my mom using a term of being in love with being in love.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a lot of what it was?
Yeah, I think so. Codependency was also a main factor in our relationship. I was very codependent in kind of viewing us as one being, one person, kind of that two halves make a whole philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And that I couldn't live without him. And so that whole being in love concept to me at that time meant completing each other. And that whole romantic thing that I now consider bullshit, because that's not healthy love. That's not what a healthy relationship looks like. And I learned that the hard way. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question. And part of this comes from our previous conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned earlier that this was really your first real, adult gay relationship.
Yep.
Do you think there was a lot of naivety in it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I on many levels too. Not only with it being my first gay relationship, but I grew up in a small town and was very sheltered as a kid. I mean, for the longest, there were probably until I was 9 or 10, I didn't even know what gay was. I, grew up in the Catholic Church, and it wasn't really talked about in the church. And it wasn't until, bullies on the bus accused me of being gay that I was like, oh, I don't even know what that is. And so, yeah, it was very sheltered, and that led to a portion of that naivete that you mentioned. Yeah.
And looking back now, do you think that he preyed on that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Narcissists have a way of, they're very perceptive. And so they can sense when somebody's vulnerable, and they do prey on that. Yep.
And real quick, for somebody who might be watching or hearing this that doesn't fully understand it, can you explain what narcissism is?
Sure. Yeah. So a narcissist is someone who lacks empathy, who refuses to accept responsibility for themselves, for their actions. They most often are emotionally abusive, so they are manipulative and do things to get their way. It really is. It's all about themselves, and there's kind of that tunnel vision. So they don't really care about the consequences of their actions, even if they could see what they are.
Okay. And I know you said, you can look back on it now,
Mm-hmm.
and you see all those red flags. Hindsight is 2020.
Yep.
I think as adults, we all know this. When in that present moment did you start to see, hey, you know what, there's a problem here?
I mean, it's interesting because while it took me 15 years to get out of it, I definitely had cycles of my own where I thought of leaving him numerous times, because I was sick and tired of being exhausted from crying so much, looking in the bathroom mirror and just telling myself like I just want to die. I want out of this. It was that bad. It was that exhausting. But when it came down to it, again, going back to believing things would get better, and I also believed that that it was my job to save him, to rescue him, to fix him. That if I loved him hard enough, he would be a better person. And that if I did leave, I could see how broken he was and how depressed and anxious he was, which was part of my rationale for staying. Like I made excuses for him and said, I saw that the reason he treated me so poorly was because of how much he didn't like himself and was struggling with his own mental health issues. And I believed that if I left him, things would only get worse for him. And I put that responsibility of his health on me.
So almost like a hero complex.
Correct. Yes. I was very much so codependency. There's a triangle you can think of called the victim triangle. And in a codependent relationship, there are different roles that the two people can play that kind of shift throughout the relationship. But one is a victim, one is a persecutor, and one is a rescuer. And I primarily was very much a rescuer with him in the victim role. And then when he was abusing me, it would shift to where I was kind of in the victim role and he was in the persecutor role. But we both took on different characters in that triangle throughout the life of our relationship.
So you've been in this relationship for 15 years. What was it that finally made you say, okay, you know what? Enough is enough. I've got to get out of here.
Yep. So on top of the abuse, he was also severely addicted to alcohol. The last 10 years of our relationship, he had significant health issues that we learned later were all because of alcohol. I knew that he drank too much, but I didn't realize just how bad it was. Again, for my own naivete and just blindness, tunnel vision to the situation. But things got so bad with his drinking that his body became so dependent on alcohol that he couldn't go 8 hours without it.
Mm.
And one night he had 3 grand mal seizures within a matter of a few hours. And I called 911 during the last seizure, and he was admitted to the ICU for a week going through alcohol withdrawal. And those seizures and that experience in the ICU, I finally hit rock bottom. It took an experience worthy of TV or the movies, just me sitting there like, is this really my life? Like, wow, this is my life. For me to finally realize, like, I cannot do this anymore. I need help. And that wasn't my decision. That wasn't the moment of my decision to leave, although that quickly followed. That was the timing of my decision for me to start getting help. So I started going to Al-Anon meetings and getting therapy, and that's when things really started to pick up for me and get better.
So when did you make the decision that you were leaving?
Yeah. So he was in rehab for a hot minute. The doctors told him that if he didn't go through inpatient rehab followed by outpatient and AA and counseling and all those things, that he's just going to go back to where he was. And he spent a week in rehab and decided it wasn't for him and came home. And the next couple months that followed, I thought he was abusive before that. You take somebody's alcohol away when they're addicted to alcohol, and it turned into a very even more challenging situation. And then, so that was a struggle in and of itself. And then that's when I first learned what a narcissist truly was. I had heard the term narcissist before, but I just thought it was somebody who was self-absorbed. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's him. That describes my husband at the time. But I came across this blog post written by a woman who was married to a narcissist, and she described her experience. And I'm like, oh my God, she's writing about my life. And she wrote in that article about a Facebook group that she founded or co-leads. And so I joined that, and post after post after post after post, I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea that people were experiencing the same thing as I was. And through my learning about narcissism, I discovered and concluded that even if he were to miraculously get sober, which I didn't have high hopes about, the abuse component wasn't going to be going away anytime soon. And I was not about to stick around for more of that. I finally hitting that breaking point and that rock bottom allowed me to step back and look at the disaster that was my life and get a different perspective on it and realize that, like, just how far I had sunk into this chaos, and starting to love myself more and more, I very quickly realized that this is not okay. I am not going to tolerate this anymore. And so 3 months after his hospital stay, I left him. I cut off all contact, and I haven't spoken to him since. For a little over 2 years, we have not had any direct contact.
So I'm assuming that you went through divorce and all of the joy that goes with that.
Correct. Yes.
I've been there. It sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of the situation, it sucks. I'm going to be nosy. Is there a bow on the horizon?
In terms of other relationships, or is
Yes.
that what you mean? Yeah. So since that time, I'd love to speak more about my healing journey, kind of with the relationship with myself that I've really cultivated. That's what I'm all about.
We're definitely going to be speaking about
Yeah.
that too. I'm just being nosy at this point.
Yeah. So, but the beauty of having a healthy relationship with myself is I've also experienced a couple of really, really great, healthy relationships with other guys since that time, that keep getting better and better with time. And the more I grow, the more I heal, the more I learn about myself and get in touch with my needs and set boundaries and all those good things. My relationships just keep getting better and better. And it's been fun for me. When I got together with him when I was 17, and I didn't mention in high school, I dated a girl for 4 years. And so I jumped from serious relationship to serious relationship without giving myself the time to really date and have fun and just, relax a little bit about the whole romantic scene. And so for the last almost year now, I've finally giving myself the chance to do that, and it's been fun. It's had its frustrations. Dating is not super glamorous, but my priority has been myself, and so dating is not something that's super high on my priority list. I'm not spending a lot of time with it. But this time that I am spending with it, I've been learning a lot about other people and about myself. And, I'm a relationship coach. So it's like it's my playground to kind of, my laboratory to kind of feel out different people, what works for different people and my interactions with them. And experiencing all of that is, helpful to my career as well as my personal development.
And now let's talk about that relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
I know there's so many different ways that you can work on building a relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's, obviously you were part of Al-Anon. There's therapy, there's self-dating, where you're taking yourself out on a date or whatever
Yep.
to really spend that time with yourself. What methods were you using?
All of those.
All of them.
Yeah. So, like I said, I began therapy right after my rock bottom. Um, I've continued seeing my therapist since that time. So for the last 2 years, I feel like I'm probably in the next month or so, probably be my last regular session. We've been doing some really intensive group therapy weekends, that really dive deep and get us in touch with our bodies. And, it's an extensive, intensive Friday, Saturday, Sunday experience. So it's more than just the, weekly hour session that you can only get so much out of that. So that has been instrumental in my growth and really connecting with myself. I also, discovered coaching. So Gay Man Thriving is an organization that works with gay men to provide coaching services. And shortly after I left my ex, I found that group, and I've been working with them for about 2 years. And I believe that doing both coaching and therapy at the same time is really what has helped me transform so quickly in the last 2 years. Because a lot of people who were recovering from abusive relationships, understandably, especially if they're in that relationship for a long time, it takes a long time to unravel that and unpack it and heal and, get to a more comfortable, satisfying place in their lives. But by doing a lot of work on myself, my life is completely different from what it was 2 years ago.
So, what has been the hardest part about building a relationship with yourself?
What comes to me when you ask that question, I would say it can be difficult to examine the parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily like. It was so easy for me for so long to place all the blame of the challenges of that relationship on my ex and not accept responsibility myself, which is ironic because, my challenge with him was that he wasn't accepting responsibility for his actions. But I've learned since then how much I enabled the behavior, how much, I made things worse by doing the things to take care of him, and my codependency really didn't allow him to be a full human being, independent and on his own and take care of himself. I did things for him to kind of parent him, and that wasn't serving him either. And I wasn't blameless. I mean, those arguments got really heated, and I could justify it by saying that I was just standing up for myself, but I didn't always act with the most loving, kind attitude or demeanor. So these are just examples of the things that, really learning to love and accept myself for all that I am and all that I've done and all that I've experienced, even the stuff, especially the stuff that I'm not necessarily proud of, or that, I would want to do differently in the future.
So, on the flip side, best part of building that relationship with yourself.
So it turns out I'm a really awesome person.
I'm going to agree with that, though, because we're friends on Facebook. I see your posts.
Yeah.
Why you would waste a good airplane by jumping out of it, I don't grasp that. But you are an awesome person.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I say that a little bit unjust. I realize how that can sound, full of myself to say I'm awesome or whatever. But my point is I really enjoy spending time with myself. Like I fill my calendar with a lot of social engagements and things to heal and grow, and the coaching stuff and the therapy stuff and all that. But some of my favorite moments and times are the days that I have just to myself, to get things done and just to relax, and just be. I never had that in the past. It was something that I missed for the longest time. I had it as a kid, but because I didn't really have a lot of friends, and so it wasn't. I felt alone and disconnected at that time. So it was a different experience now, where I feel very connected to myself and my great network of friends and family, and so it's very different to be alone now. I don't feel lonely when I'm alone.
So, if you were to give somebody advice as far as steps to take to build that relationship with themselves, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think something that's really, really important is to start noticing how you talk to yourself. As a kid, in addition to my journey with sexuality, where I really put a lot of shame onto myself and rejected myself for who I was, I had gotten to a place of mostly acceptance by the time I met my ex, but there was a good 4, 5, 6 years of just really, really dark times, and that took a toll on how I treated myself. In addition to that, perfectionism has been something that I've struggled with since I was a kid. I've learned recently that perfectionism is something I developed as a small child as a way to get love and attention. And that created a lot of self-abuse on me as well throughout my childhood, teenage years, even adult life, where if I didn't get an A or an A plus on a test or an assignment, like the stuff that I put myself through was not healthy. And between that and the shame around the sexuality, like I didn't have a great relationship with myself. And then lo and behold, that's how the universe works, is because of how I treated myself, I attracted someone to me who treated me the exact same way. So to answer your question around cultivating that healthy relationship with yourself, it's really, really important to watch how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself. Ask yourself, like, would I talk to my best friend the way I'm talking to myself right now? Whether that's how you look in the mirror, or how you handle new experiences. Like, for me, I have a lot of issues around trying something new because I'm afraid I'm going to screw it up, and then I'm stupid, that sort of thing. It has taken a lot of practice to be patient with myself and kind and gentle with myself, to unravel that old way of being impatient and unaccepting and really abusive to myself.
Well, we do have a question from somebody who's
Okay.
watching this live on YouTube.
Great.
And Norman just asked, "Hi, what is the cause of narcissism?"
It's interesting. It can come from a number of different places, and I'm not, a trained clinical psychologist. This is just from my own personal experience and the things that I've learned. There are a few different things. It can be inherited from family, so it passed down from generation to generation. What I learned from my therapist is a heavy use of alcohol or other substances in teenage years can stunt an individual's emotional growth and development. And so if you start drinking heavily at age 15, for example, and don't stop, your emotional growth is going to be stunted at age 15. And when she explained this to me, it made perfect sense. I'm like, oh my God, I have been with a teenager for the last 15 years. It explained how, the consequences of his actions, he just didn't see those, and it was all about him. And so, yeah, there's a few different things that can cause it.
And actually, what you just said, that's something that I learned in rehab. There have been numerous scientific studies that show that once there is a substance that is entered into the system on a regular basis,
Yep.
that mental development, that brain development does stop.
Yep.
And you are able to get it back, but it's usually many years after you quit using that substance that it'll start developing again.
Yeah, exactly. My therapist actually told me that. She said it's possible that at the core, my ex actually isn't a narcissist, but because he was so far along in his addiction, it would take him, at least a year or two to kind of unravel the physical and the chemical addiction to it, and take several more years of therapy and counseling and other things to unravel the behaviors and the thoughts associated that caused the addiction in the first place. And it is theoretically possible for a narcissist to to eliminate that characteristic of themselves, but it would take a lot of work. And by nature, a narcissist doesn't believe that anything is wrong with them. So the cases of someone eliminating narcissistic behavior from their lives it's pretty darn rare.
And it looks like Norman does have another question. Excuse me. Can childhood abuse cause it?
Yes, it can. Yep.
Well, Ted, I want to thank you for coming on here and making yourself very vulnerable and sharing what you went through and where you're at. I truly appreciate it. I said this last time you and I talked. I have loved being able to build connection with you, having you on my Facebook, on my Instagram, getting to see these different facets of your life. Like watching a video of you jumping out of a plane. I mean,
Ah,
my husband loved that, by the way.
good. I did too.
I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And you know how I do. I ask a final question at the end of all my episodes. What's the most inspiring thing that has ever been said to you?
Oh man, I don't know. What's coming to me is what my therapist has told me many times, which is when you take care of yourself first, you're giving everyone around you exactly what they need.
Oh my God, I love that.
And it took me a long time to unpack that because self-care and putting myself first always felt selfish, but I learned very quickly that there's a big difference between selfish and self-loving.
Very much so.
And we as people, we struggle with that because like if we're worried about hurting someone's feeling, like being invited to a party and like the idea of saying no when you've been invited, like no. But if you say yes and you don't really want to be there, you're doing both yourself and them a disservice by not showing up as your full, authentic, loving self. So that's just an example of how when you take care of yourself, for example, staying home that night, you're giving everyone around you exactly what they need to.
I absolutely love that. Well, one more time, just for anybody who didn't hear it earlier, what is the name of your book and where can it be found?
My book is on Amazon. It's called Healthy Me, Happy We, Transforming Relationships with Yourself and Others. My website is tedsmith.life, and you can find the link to my book, as well as my Instagram, Facebook, my other podcasts, and things like that. So tedsmith.life, and you can find everything there.
Okay, I'm typing this in really quick. I have to learn how to type first because I am struggling. It's been a hard day.
Perfect.
So again, Healthy Me, Happy We on Amazon. And for anybody who wants to reach out to Ted, make connection there, tedsmith.life.
Yep, exactly.
Ted, thank you so much again for being a part of my show, for coming on here and chatting with me. I've truly enjoyed it. And
Me too.
I think that definitely it's been eye-opening. I think conversations like this need to happen more frequently so that people can see what is going on in their own lives and around them.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it as well.
Of course. You guys, I will be back again on Sunday with another episode. So I will see you Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Have a great night, everybody.